Hey everyone, welcome back to another Safari Limited review. Today we'll be taking a look at one of their older figures. It's their 2004 adult and baby Hypacrosaurus. This pair of figures unfortunately has been retired for just about a decade now. These are one of the figures that when I used to see them in shops, I was like, I'll get it next time, I'll get it next time, until there was no next time. And I've been looking for these figures for years now, and I happened to stumble upon a collector that was selling part of his collection. So I immediately jumped on these two because seriously, I've been looking for these figures for probably a solid 4 years now. So I'm so happy to finally add these to my collection. I always mention in my Hadrosaur figure reviews that there's not a lot of diversity of Hadrosaur figures among the dinosaur toy companies, and that's part of the reason why I really wanted to track down this Hypacrosaurus pair. Safari has done a decent job of giving us a few different species, but there's a lot of species that still need to be made, so hopefully between Collect Day and Safari we'll get some more diversity later on in the future. So moving on to this figure, Hypacrosaurus is a late Cretaceous hadrosaur from Alberta, Canada and Montana. In the 1990s, nests were discovered of the species that contain eggs and hatchlings. It is very similar looking to Corythosaurus, but the difference lies in the crest. The crest of Hypacrosaurus is not as tall. It's a little bit wider, and it was actually two bony points at the back of the crest, which differentiated it from Corythosaurus, but unfortunately, those bony points are not reflected on this figure. So let's just do a couple quick measurements before we take a closer look at these figures, starting with the adult. The adult figure is just about 7.5 inches long from the tip of the tail to the tip of the beak, and it's just about 2.5 inches tall to the top of the crest right there. So an adult Hypacrosaurus was about 30 feet long, so with those measurements, that'll put this figure somewhere in the 148 scale range. And let's bring the baby back in. The baby is just about just over 3 inches long from the tip of the tail to the tip of its little beak, and it is just about 1.75 inches tall to the top of its underdeveloped crest. I actually couldn't find any sizes of the hatchlings of Hypacrosaurus, so I could not give you a scale on the baby. Moving on to the paint scheme of these two figures, they are very similarly painted, but the baby actually has a little bit more paint application compared to the adult. The crest on the baby is actually highlighted with black paint. It's not highlighted on the adult. I kind of wish there was like a little bit of black lining between the yellow and green on the crest. There's some black bands that go down the body. The legs and hind feet have a dark wash over it, and he has some bright blue and yellow highlights, which are very similar to the adult markings. So yeah, this little figure is definitely really cool. It's nice to have a baby and adult figure to display next to each other. This baby figure does have some baby-like proportions. It has the oversized head with the large eyes. The crest is underdeveloped, and it has very baby-like proportions. It is a really nice-looking figure, and after talking to some other collectors, I guess the baby is harder to find than the adult figure, so I'm still very happy that I was able to get both at once. You got some nicely sculpted detail. The mouth is sculpted just slightly open, and there's actually some pink paint in there, so you can see the tongue, some nice folds and wrinkles. There's really no scale detail on this figure. It's one of the older Safari figures. If you compare this to some of their newer stuff, they have come a really long way over the years, but the detail is still quite nice, and the paint job is also nice. It's a little bit more crude because, like I said, it is a figure that is over 15 years old now. But you still got some large osteoderms sculpted into this figure. The paint is not really like perfect on these osteoderms. I wish it would have lined up a little bit better, but those are just really, really minor nitpicks. But I do quite like this baby Hypacrosaurus figure. So let's bring in the adult figure. Now the paint scheme, like I said, is very similar to the baby. One of the biggest differences is the baby had black stripes on its back. This one has light green stripes to mix in with the dark green plastic that this figure, I think it's cast in bright yellow. So there is a lot of paint apps on this one. Usually Safari used to like to use the base plastic color as the main coloration, but they pretty much covered this whole figure in dark green. So let's zoom in and look at that nicely sculpted head. Like I said, the only thing that's really missing on the sculpt are the points on the back of the crest, but this is an older figure, so it gets a pass. You got some nice bright blue highlights along the head. The eye is painted in yellow with a black pupil. You have some yellow stripes along the crest. Like I said earlier, I wish there was just a little bit of black lining around the yellow to kind of break that up. The mouth is sculpted slightly open, just like the baby, and they added some pink paint in there so you can see the tongue. There's no real scale detail on this figure. It's mostly folds and wrinkles. The only scale detail are these large osteoderms that are sculpted along the side of the body and the hind legs. Some of the osteoderms are painted in. You have these bright yellow and blue spots along the body. The hands are nicely sculpted. You got some gray paint for the hooves along the feet. Same thing with the back feet. You have dark gray paint for the hooves. You see more of that bright blue marking along the hind legs. You got a nice ridge of the vertebrae along the back right here. Some more folds and wrinkles down the tail. On the underside is just the bright pink plastic that this figure is molded in. So all in all, even though this is like a 16-year-old figure, it still is a really nice Hadrosaur figure. All right, let's move on to some comparisons. First up is the Safari Limited Feathered T-Rex. And I always say it every time I bring this figure out. I think it's one of the best sculpted figures Safari has ever put out. And next up is their equally amazing Triceratops. And let's move right along with some other Hadrosaur figures, starting with the OG Carnegie Collection Maiasaura. And next up is another Carnegie Collection figure. Here it is with the very closely related Corythosaurus. You can see these two figures look very, very similar to each other, but I absolutely love this Corythosaurus figure. I think it's one of the best Carnegie Collection figures in the entire line. And next up is the Bullyland Lambeosaurus. Really need Safari to make a Lambeosaurus figure. I think it would look absolutely fantastic. And here is another Hadrosaur figure from another company. Here is the new Mojo Fun Manchurosaurus. And lastly, here are some of the newer Safari Limited Hadrosaurs. Here is their new Edmontosaurus. Here is their slightly older Gripposaurus. Trying to get these all into shot, so just bear with me. And lastly, here is their Parasaurolophus, which is a very underrated figure from them. This came out, I think, in 2017 when I first saw the promotional images. It didn't look that exciting to me, but once I got this thing in hand, it is beautifully painted. There's so much fine scale detail all over this figure. So very underrated figure from Safari. So Safari has given us some decent variety with Hadrosaur figures over the year, but we definitely need more. I've had my fingers crossed for a couple of years for a Saurolophus figure, but at this point, I'll take any new species of Hadrosaur from Safari. I think they make some of the nicest looking Hadrosaur figures on the market. So final thoughts on this Hypacrosaurus pair. If you can track one down, I highly recommend you pick one up. Over the years, I've only seen it pop up for sale a couple of times. So I got mine for a little bit more than retail. So I really don't know what the aftermarket collector price is currently going on this figure, because there's so few of them being offered out there. But if you definitely stumble upon these two for the right price, definitely snatch them up, because like I said, it took me years to finally track one down. So at the time of this review, it's the end of September, so probably in the next month or two, we'll probably be getting our first reveals from Safari of their 2021 lineup, and hopefully we get a new Hadrosaur figure in that line, and also a new sauropod, because I was very disappointed that we did not get a sauropod this year. So as always, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, show your support by hitting that subscription button just below the video. Each subscription helps out the channel tremendously, and it's greatly appreciated, and I'll see you guys for the next one.